Hey everyone, Elio here with another video for the Ultra Trading Card game, doing some Elite Ranked gameplay with Subhash and Marmo. It's pronounced Subash? What? It's pronounced Subash, not Subhash. Are you sure? No, no I'm not. So yeah, welcome to a Subash and Marmo video, I think. I really like Subash and Marmo. I think they're underplayed in terms of Axiom heroes right now. You see a lot more Traced, and you even see more Sierra than you see Subash. But I think that Subash has some real qualities to him that can let him compete with the good decks and players in the current meta. One of the problems with Subash, though, is that he runs out of fuel, and so while he can start off pretty blistering fast and have a consistent 2-2 that is coming out, he sputters out sometimes towards the end game, which I try to solve a few ways here. It's pretty common for people to be running Ada Lovelaces, Axiom Salvagers, and Frankensteins in order to get resupply value and try to continue to have things to play. I only have one of the rare Ada Lovelace. I would love to be playing 3 here, but I try to adjust for this in other ways. But on top of those, I play 3 of the rare Hooked. I said this before, but I'm a big fan of this card. It's basically magical training that just costs 1 more on the front side, but it's a magical training that can win lanes or cause your opponent to lose lanes. It's awesome versus Fen, it's awesome versus Isatox, and sometimes it's just awesome versus characters, which is the entire point of the game. We also make use of 3 of the rare Brass Bug Hive. This is in some matchups, such as Waru, to give us a inevitable engine that once we run out of cards, we're still pretty easily able to make 6/6/6 power worth of things split up into 2/3/3/3 bugs each turn. Many of our other cards are not surprising choices. Some things that I'll point out are our 2 rare Inari. We like this because we like to be able to have a 2 mana 3/3/3 play like the Dr. Frankenstein. Inari is not as good as the Frankenstein, but it's a great way to actually get a ton of power out, which sometimes is what you need to win lanes. Its supportability sometimes comes into play, making an extra bug for free, or in a pinch doing a resupply to dig something if you're really, really desperate. But really, it's just a well-sized body for 2 mana. Our uniques, we're reusing the Martingale that we played in our Traced deck. Great coming from reserve and lets us get replays out of our powerful from reserve effects like Salvager, Frankenstein, or Lovelace. Lyra Chronicler works great in this deck since we're pretty much always going to have a token. We want to make our token every turn if we can help it, and this is going to be a Frankenstein-like effect coming into play with a big body and giving us a resupply. Frankenstein, of course, relies on Haven to be out in order to get that resupply, which hopefully often we're able to get. Finally, we have this copy of Anansi. This is pretty similar to a rare Anansi, except ours is gaining benefit from each player's reserve, which is not the normal mode for the Axiom Anansi. This guy just ends up being big, and is another big sort of threat that we play for the same reasons that we play the rare Inari. The robot joining your expedition effect is theoretically possible to trigger with the Hive here, but in general, we're not expecting to do that. This guy is just a big body. Last thing I'd point out in the deck is the 3 copies of Keelan Burst as our only removal. We're looking to play this against things like Waru, and maybe against some troublesome permanents like Lyra Festival if they're threatening to win the game, or other people's Haven Bastions. But really, we're the fast blistering deck that's trying to close out a game, and we don't care that we can't hit bigger things like Hydrocana, because we'll just try to win underneath them, and if necessary, hook them to the unhelpful side so we can win the lane anyway. That's the deck, hoping that it plays a lot better during versus some of the things like Sigmar that were giving me trouble on my Ysmir build. And we'll jump into some games and see how it plays out. Okay, first up we have a Siggy. This Sigmar player was top 20 at the start of this match, so we'll see if we can do better than our Ysmir decks have been doing lately. We have 2 Earharts, a Brass Bug Hive here. I don't like keeping something this big in my opening hand in a deck like Subhash. I definitely want to keep the Martingale. I think it's a great unique and will give me some value later on. I'd like to keep the Salvager so that I can make sure that I continue to have fuel throughout the game, which leaves a choice of really, do I want Inari or Earhart? I don't like to go into Sigmar with things in my reserve when I can avoid them, especially early on when I don't have backup plays. And since I'm going first, I don't necessarily want to do the Salvager as my opening play, which would get me fuel, but would also just put something in my reserve for him to potentially discard, and maybe we lose lanes anyway. So I'll plan on playing the Inari, which means I'll keep the Salvager for a later turn, the Martingale, and go from there. This will also let me play to a point when I have a 2 power advantage in both lanes by putting the Bug in the right lane and the Inari in the left lane, which is actually kind of awkward for Sigmar to fight against unless they have a Baba Yaga, which they do not, so they pass the first round, giving us a 2 advantage to start off, which is always strong. Now, we draw a Capelli and another Inari here. Again, kind of going to this idea of trying not to play into Order Spy if I can avoid it. There's a 40% chance they had it in their opening hand. We'll see if they, potentially have it now. But I love being able to discard Capellia when my opponent is going first, if I have an empty reserve, so that I can keep that reserve empty and potentially blank some cards in their hand. So with that, I think I'll keep like my original 2 plus the Capellia and put the Inari back into mana, which will let me make a bug, let me play out the Capellia for a future turn. Both sides here are fairly equivalent, where if I don't win them, it's great, and if I do win them, at least the opposite side does something. So I do end up going just both left here to continue pushing this lane, but I don't think that makes a huge difference between the two. We will have this extra mana here, except for the Robin Hood coming into play. Because this Robin Hood comes into play, prevents us from being able to play both these things. We have the option of trying to play one of these to get something into our reserve to get additional value the next turn, both of which would do that. But that's not necessarily what I'm looking to do without having a Haven in play. If I had the Haven in play, I'd be more interested in playing things from reserve and getting the extra power. But for now, I'll preserve my resources, pass, trade lanes with him here, and I'm starting off the next round with a solid thing in play. Here, I'll put back the Keelan Elemental. We can make a bug on the right-hand side this time. What we put back into reserve with Subhash, I don't want to do the Martingale because this isn't the most exciting thing for me to play twice, which leaves either Frankenstein or Salvager. I don't think we need to use the Frankenstein yet just for the power. And with us making a bug on the right side, we'll be tying his potential Robin Hood play anyway, while both advancing on the left as well. So this means that we can kind of poke through those ties with our 1-cost things. So with that, I'll put the Salvager into reserve so we can refuel, and I don't need to overcommit my stronger power things, and I can save those for later on. This lets me go left. We do get a Lovelace, our one rare Lovelace, which is great, which will give us more value there. He plays here, and as said before, we can just ping through with our would-be 1-drop and threaten to take both lanes, but he does have the Ortis Trooper, which makes this a overall even trade for the round. I'll also note that when we play the Salvager here, it blocks him from advancing on left, so it's just fairly clean. We're definitely off to a strong lead here early on, and being able to have all of this Lovelace value is pretty inevitable. Also, drawing 2 Havens and having the Frankenstein, I'm no longer really worried about resources at this point, and I feel like I can try to push through power. I do have the choice here, though, of do I keep the Frankenstein or the 2 Havens, and I don't want to take my foot off the gas so much that I'm casting 2 Havens this turn, so I'll put one of the Havens back. If it was earlier on, I'd probably be more excited about playing both of them, but I can put the Frankenstein here to make sure that my Haven isn't at risk of an Ortis Spy. He plays a Gatekeeper, still has plenty of mana left. We can open up with Lovelace to draw the card, otherwise we would not have a card in hand to do that with. Feel safer about doing this now since he didn't open with Ortis Spy, which people tend to not sandbag sabotage effects. He plays another Trooper there. We play out our Bravos Bastion, and he plays another Trooper, this one with a unique ability that actually gives it, let me see if I can get this to just stick there, gives it the charge ability. So this is a 1-mana charge. In the reserve, it's somewhat useless. It does provide a body for other charge effects, but this is the big turn from it. With that, we're now down by 5 in the mountain here, and we only have 1 mana left. We're definitely on the left side, also down by 3. But the Martingale is a Martingale, and so we can actually use this for its normal ability. As we kind of said before, we're a little bit less concerned about running out of resources now, though we're starting to burn through some of them. But this is a turn that I think it's worth using this discount to get the Frankenstein out there, win the left lane. So rather than him turn it into a tie game, he can take one, we can take one, and we maintain our pretty strong lead. So we discard the Martingale, we put out the Frankenstein rather than just passing and losing, and we go ahead and refill. Getting the Tinkerbell is interesting. Because this isn't as good from reserve, it doesn't really do anything. We can ignore it, and we can potentially get rid of this Gatekeeper, kind of attacking his resources in place. Will be going first, so you won't have a chance to protect it. I don't think that we need 2 sabotage effects with the way that this game is kind of going right now, so we get rid of that one that we just drew, leaving us with things that will continue to both the 2 of the best cards in the deck in terms of applying a lot of power pressure by having high threats, but also resupplying and keeping our fuel plenty stocked. With that, because we're currently on a blue and brown lane, this seems like a good turn for us to put the Chronicler in reserve rather than the Frankenstein, because this is a turn where you can guarantee it's going to be useful no matter the side. That being said, we did end up going with the Frankenstein, which lets us block his left lane more effectively. I think either is fine. You're kind of trading the offense for the defense, and it's not like this is a big sacrifice in power. Plus, we will be going for... If we don't win, we're going to have a lane where this card's going to be good no matter what. So the defense does make sense here. Now, because it's closer to... we'll open up with the Tinkerbell so we can use this opportunity to attack his one card there. He drops a Spy and does hit our Frankenstein, which reduces our plays by a bit. But the other advantage of the sequencing that we did there is that the Chronicler's a lot better from hand than the Frankenstein is. So we can play this to the right. He has a lot of mana left, so thinking that we can also protect this left lane is a little bit riskier. Also, playing it to the right does a full block on him, or at least attempts to, while advancing our side. He plays Baba, which will take the lead for him in this left lane, as well as draw him up on cards. He'll overflow in the reserve, but he has this unique that isn't really good from the reserve. And now we're only 1 point away from winning. That being said, he did have that Spy, and if he has another one here, it could put us in a pretty tough position, though at least we would have the Brassbug Hive to have something going into the final turn. In general, with Subhash, you want to be using his ability every turn that you can. There's some exceptions where you may decide not to, but it's a really great value, and especially once you have a Haven in play, you want to be able to put cards in your reserve so that they play better from there. In addition, this Foundry mechanic is actually going to give us the potential ability to cast both the Chronicler and the Brassbug Hive this turn, since it will have the discount. So while we are a little bit lower on fuel this turn, depending on what we get with the resupply, we have a great opportunity to basically force him into an incredibly difficult position in the final round with our Brassbug Hive. So now he ties up on water. The Lovelace is just a body here, so this makes our play of discounted Brassbug Hive pretty clear. And we can play this strong to the left, putting us up by a total of 4 resources over here, and it's going to be tough for him to potentially come back or tie this up, but he does manage to do that with his 2 cards. So we tie on the right side, he advances 1 on the left, but now we're going into a turn where we have Brassbug Hive plus Subhash, and we're starting each turn with 6 power on the board. This turn, we don't plan on playing another Brassbug Hive, but we are at 8 mana, and the Lovelace will draw with us playing the Brassbug Hive into reserve. So we won't mana anything, And because he has two cards in reserve, neither of them particularly more exciting than the other. I mean, the Frog Prince does give more power to stop us, um, but it's not a huge differential on which one we care about getting rid of. So we'll open up with the Lovelace play first, to make sure that we have our fuel going, and we can use Tinkerbell to get rid of whatever he has next, as well as have the maximum amount of information available to us by seeing which card that we're going to draw from the Ada Lovelace ability. We do draw Capella, which is at least can advance on the right here, so that's good. We'll play out the Tinkerbell, continue to push the power advantage on the left, and get rid of one of his options that can draw him into further options. And from here, we're kind of just seeing what he can potentially play out. Our plays are a little automatic. We're just making sure that we have the leads where we can. Also note that Capella is a robot, so grows from the Brass Bug Hive, which is sick. Opponent closes out with some teamwork training, but our advantage on the power is so great that even a double teamwork training is not enough here. And we take down the W, Subhash versus Sigmar. Okay, up against a pretty strong Fen player. We really like Hooked against Fen. One, Fen has a lot of resources and the potential to run us out of resources if they get any of their sabotage effects. And this is one of the reasons that we're running hooks, is that it can kind of keep us going throughout the game. It's also just fantastic versus Fen versus other heroes, because Fen has a lot of imbalanced characters where you could potentially put them into a lane where their character is no longer doing anything. Haven, we're always going to keep. And with that, it gives us either a Frankenstein or really a Lovelace as our choices. I'm not super excited about Capella versus something that doesn't have a ton of sabotage from hand. There is Tanuki, but people tend to be more excited about Tinkerbell right now. And my favorite use of Capella is to kind of keep my reserve empty. So I'm not, like, even though I get this kind of bonus effect from it, it's not very powerful for what it does, especially if I don't already have a Haven or Brass Bug in to buff it up. So I'm pretty happy putting that back. And both of these cards will give me some sort of value that will make me want it over the Inari. Usually the Frankenstein is just a better version of the Inari in this deck. I could see either of these choices. I do end up going with the Frankenstein over the Lovelace, though. That will let me kind of open with Haven into the reserve, which will be a sort of pseudo draw. In that I'm putting something in a reserve that has the same effect played from reserve or from hand. And it also just gives me the bigger body in the long term. But he opens up with an Aloe Vera, which is one of the things that can block this lane. But we're not feeling terrible about that, because at least he's not playing it on a turn when he can anchor it, which we don't have a lot of ways to deal with besides the Keylon Burst. And if we do get Keylon Burst, it's great versus the coming from reserve version of an anchored Aloe Vera, because it'll have fleeting. Drawing two more Frankenstein and already having a Haven in play means that we're more comfortable getting rid of this second Hooked, even though it is a great card. But these give us card advantage as well as giving us a big body. So we put back this Hooked. Opponent draws, sees a Tanuki, which is good to note that there is going to be at least some amount of reserve effects coming from the opponent. Some amount of reserve hate coming from the hand from the opponent. Make our bug on the right side, and he plays a magical training to stall out a little bit. With that, our play becomes pretty clear of just evening out our board and putting Frankenstein on the left. Nothing is coming from that. We just see a Keylon Burst that we can potentially use on the Aloe Vera in the future. And opponent plays a pretty cool unique. It's basically another copy of Ouroboros Inkcaster when it leaves the Expedition Zone, returning a card from the reserve to the hand. This one actually functions even if it's leaving while fleeting. So pretty cool card. And followed up with another Inkcaster, unsurprisingly, to take this lane. He keeps an advantage, and he's going to be able to return two cards to his hand. Our reserve's a little awkward right now, so like we'd like to be able to hopefully play one of these next turns, since things can be stuck in there forever, and we don't want to overflow if we can avoid it. But he does return Tanuki, so we're less likely to overflow, as well as aloe vera. With him returning the Tanuki, it's probably less likely that we're going to have a problem of overflowing anytime soon. But still, we'll see what comes up. We do see our third hooked, which I'm pretty reticent to get rid of. Again, it is great in this matchup, and I don't want to have my only copy of hooked be the one that's in my reserve. And this is going to be drawing me 2 cards over the lifetime of its casting. In contrast, Salvager is just going to give me the resupply, though it is a 2/2 body with the Haven. But we have plenty of resupply already. So I get rid of the Salvager with the thinking that the hooked is just going to be better for me over the longer term of the game. Especially since, again, we have some cards in our reserve that are a little awkward, and it's possible that resupply just ends up not being value because there's nothing we can do with it. We'll even up our lanes over here. And we do see our rare Anansi. Opponent plays Tanuki, though, and immediately gets rid of that. But this does give us an opportunity to use our hooked from reserve, which will make it so he's not currently winning either lane, and the best that he'll probably be able to do is play a character to trade both lanes rather than threaten multiple lane wins. He does use the Paper Herald to tie up the left, and the another unique from hand to take the advantage on the left. Oh, sorry. He was not tying it up with just the Paper Herald because he didn't have the water there. But this will end up tying it up. And for my side, but take the lead himself. He blocks, so we trade lanes. I'm pretty okay with this because this is, a unique gone from hand. But this unique also just isn't fantastic for Subhash because Subhash isn't playing things without fleeting very often. Pretty much everything is coming from reserve. So while this is a fantastic version of Lyra Cloth Dancer, it's not necessarily the best versus my deck. So we trade lanes. He maintains a 1-lane lead. We did draw this Haven from our hooked, so hopefully we can start to use that to push a power advantage and take a lane lead soon. He has the same thought with the Cloth Dancer that it's not as effective versus me and gets rid of it. We draw a Hive and a Keelan Burst. I don't really know if I'm trying to play Hive this game, but I also don't think that I necessarily need 2 Keelan Bursts. So we'll get rid of one of them since we already have the one in reserve. The opponent does have the aloe vera in hand that we know about, but I'm not trying to keep multiple bursts just out of a concern of that. Especially since I'm kind of looking into transitioning into the pushing power portion of the game rather than caring so much about our opponent's resources. And if he's playing 3 mana for a 2 grass power thing, then it means that we're probably gonna be able to advance on that lane anyway. Now, we make an interesting choice here to put the Brassbug Hive in reserve. We know that we're going to be playing Haven to open up, and we're actually a little wary of the Tanuki right now, or the Tanukis right now. And one thing that I was concerned about here is that if I put Frankenstein in there and put Haven there, I could potentially play Haven and then get Tanuki'd out of my Frankenstein. And if the Haven doesn't turn out anything great, I'm in a pretty awkward position going forward, where I'm not going to be putting any real power on the board this turn, and I have no characters in the reserve or in my hand to future go to the reserve that I can rely on. So that scared me a little bit, and I put the Brassbug Hive here, which will also, if he plays a Tanuki on it, it means he likely doesn't have like Cloth Cocoon in hand, but if he ignores it, then maybe it's something that I should be aware of him not being worried about if he ever passes up an opportunity to sabotage it. He opens with a Inkcaster. Looks like he's looking to just trade lanes. Our Haven pulls up a Tinkerbell, which is a cool pull. He plays Anansi on left, so now he has a 2 power advantage on both. That's definitely awkward, but we can at least play Tinkerbell to get rid of his known 2 mana play, and take a small lead on the left. Hope that he doesn't have a 2 power, another Inkcaster like effect, which he does not. So once again, trading lanes. This time he's going to be taking back a acapella training with his Ouroboros Inkcaster. But similar to the Cloth Dancer, that's not a super effective card versus us since we're generally playing from reserve. It is a decent stall card, which he will, in all likelihood, end up with a mana advantage over us, where he's going to keep getting mana and we will stop probably around 7 or 8 mana. And the acapella training lets him use that to see how we're playing to the board, which could be trouble. We see another Brassbug Hive. We do not need to, so we're pretty happy putting that into mana. We now have the option of putting the Frankenstein in and building it out. We can't really do much with the Foundry mechanic. Putting it into the reserve is going to put us at 6, so we would just be casting the Hive, which is an awkward thing to do when he may have Cloth Cocoon in hand. And using it for the discount doesn't let us cast anything else because we'd only have 1 extra mana. Since we're first, we're also pretty comfortable putting this Frankenstein there and knowing that we're going to be able to play it. It makes sense for us to put Bug left here since we know Aloe Vera is a card that we're worried about. And so if water ends up being the thing that we're pushing on, it's nice to have a little bit more water on the right side. And our higher power is going to come from where the Frankenstein is. He does see a Tinkerbell, and so this will be an interesting turn where we'll resupply something with the Frankenstein, and what he hits with this Tinkerbell will be a little telling. If it's not the Brassbug Hive, then there's a good chance that it's Cloth Cocoon in his hand. He does hit Keylong Burst, which, he could not have Cloth Cocoon, he's just trying to protect the Aloe Vera. That definitely also makes sense. From our position, we have some choices. Playing out this first Foundry mechanic feels solid. It's a stall play, and will also build up our left side of the board to a substantial number. So we'll feel good about that. But opponent follows with a discounted play of his own to play just acapella training to stall. Now, for me here, I could pass, and I'll probably trade lanes with him again. I could play a Foundry mechanic out to do my own stalling, but I'm running low on characters and I'm kind of in a Haven game, and so I really want to try to ensure that I have things in the following rounds to contribute to board, so I'm not super thrilled about that. I can, however, Hooked, and this Tinkerbell is only a 1 power on the left side, and it'll also draw me a card and potentially see whether or not the Foundry mechanic is going to be of any use, though it's unlikely, because this is a grass-only lane, and once this Tinkerbell is moved, water is not going to be a big competition over here. So we'll Hooked, we draw a card, take a good resource position here. And opponent, though, does have one of the big grass things that you can have, which would have won this lane with or without the Tinkerbell. So we're fine with it. Once again, though, we're trading lanes. And we're getting to the point when he's in a very threatening position of now he can win 2 lanes and immediately win the game. We do draw 2 Capellias and a Chronicler in our most recent 3 draws. And now we're in a real interesting position. We're not trying to rush out this Brassbug Hive necessarily. Again, we're a little worried of Cloth Cocoon. Putting Capellia in the reserve with Subhash's ability is a gambit because it's playing for future turns, and our opponent is now at a place where they can threaten 2 wins here. We know that our opponent can potentially put out 4 water with the Aloe Vera and 5 mountain on the right side. That would be all of his mana. So if he does anything that doesn't start with one of those plays, that's no longer on the board for him. But that does mean that he wouldn't be putting out a Cloth Cocoon on the Brassbug Hive if he was doing those 2 things. And so knowing that, we also have a Chronicler, which is good on the right side, even from hand, or Hooked plays to potentially mess with his movement here. This Hatter in particular is pretty vulnerable to the water being moved. That being said, again, he has these acapella trainings. He's got plenty of mana. He's probably going to be able to stall out in a point when he's not having to commit this Hatter, and he's probably not going to try to commit the Hatter, knowing that he sees this Hooked here. Ultimately, I decide to put back a Foundry mechanic, which when I see Tinkerbell come up, I'm now cautious and scared of putting my Chronicler into the reserve, because that means that it's going to get immediately sabotaged, and I'd be in a tough position. So my thinking now is that I want to try to discard Capellia. because I don't want to put the Chronicler into the board, which means I'm playing towards that future turn, and I want to try to block one lane as well as I can. What that probably means is putting 5 power into one side of the board. Um, we do decide to do that into the left-hand side of the board, because that's the side that, as far as we know, should likely take 2 cards for him to try to match the power that he needs there. The Hatter not being able to contribute and block that by itself. And we can play out the Capella to the right side, so both present and future turns, it's giving value there. If opponent did open with Hatter here, we could do Hooked and then do some Chronicler stuff. But we'll see what he does. He opens with immediately getting rid of the Hooked. So we now have some choices. If we play the Chronicler out, then it's going to get Acapella training, which is not what we want. It'd be very difficult going to the final round without that Chronicler. We could play the Capella out to stall, but then, he can play Alavera there. We're forced to play the Chronicler, and that gets Acapella trained. We would trade lanes in that scenario, but we'd be so behind on resources, we'd be just screwed. So that really leaves us with this Brassbug Hive, which, we're wary of a Cloth Cocoon just immediately removing it. But at least if we put 5 power here and he Cloth Cocoons it, he's using all his mana for the turn. There's not a ton of cheap water effects in Lyra. Lyra Navigator is one of them, but it doesn't see a ton of popularity, though I do like it myself. And so it's unlikely that, with his 1 Alavera, that he's going to be able to use that in combination with anything else at 5 mana to be able to get to enough water. So we play the Brassbug Hive, building on that, getting that 5 power, and it puts us in a position where it's going to be difficult for him to advance both lanes, so at least we survive another day. And he does have the Cloth Cocoon to get rid of the Brassbug Hive. But that's okay. We still have 2 Havens, and we're going to be advancing this round and starting next round with material and play with this Capella and 2 Havens. So all in all, feels like a very decent position. He's used at this point a Tanuki and 2 Tinkerbells. So his reserve is getting lower. Here, we have 8 mana to spend, and the sum total cost of our things is 8 mana, or 7 mana if we're playing the Chronicler from reserve. The Lovelace will draw a card, but there's not a strong need for us now to be manaing rather than keeping our options open. The question will be, however, what are we putting into reserve in order to keep playing? Drawing this rare Lovelace means that we can really make sure our fuel is available. I think that, if I'm going to Lovelace, maybe putting the Capella for mana is the right move, since I'm going to have an excess of resources. But there still is another Tinkerbell that can come. He may have more Tanukis. And if I put this into mana, and whatever I put into reserve with the Lovelace gets sabotaged, then I'm going to have almost no plays left with which to try to interact on the board. And so that scares me. But I do want to put the Lovelace there, as it's going to give me the most overall resources, which would be important to make sure I have enough fuel to try to close out the game. So we open with Lovelace. We'll use that to put the Martingale into the reserve, since if that gets sabotaged, it has the least impact on our potential board power, and the Chronicler is just as good coming from hand in terms of the power it's putting on the board. He does get Cloth Cocoon though, which is frightening, and is another reason not to put down the Chronicler, because if we're playing the Chronicler out, it's likely to get Cloth Cocooned, and losing 5 of our mountain power for 3 mana is pretty scary. Opponent plays Acapella Training, which, as we know, is a stall play. The fact that he doesn't play this one from reserve, though, also means that he likely has a Anansi or another unique with an Anansi-like effect. Otherwise, he would not tip his hand, and this would be the one that he used. We also know that he has the Alavera from earlier. Fen doesn't have the ability to put cards from hand into mana, so we feel pretty confident that right now his hand is Anansi Alavera. That itself is going to cost 6 mana if you want to play those out. But he has a lot of other options on the board too. The Cloth Cocoon here can get rid of things, but also anything we play from hand, including the Chronicler, can get Acapella Cloth Cocooned. With the Salvager having been our draw from the Lovelace, it seems pretty likely that our 3 cards played this turn will be Chronicler, Salvager, and Martingale. It's just a question of which order. And with that, we kind of want to play our most stalling plays first, which means either Salvager or the Martingale. We went the Martingale, which I think in hindsight, I would have liked to stall more with the Salvager. But the advantage of the Martingale is that it grows this Capella to 5 power, while also making it no longer susceptible to Cloth Cocoon unless he uses another Acapella training. He does play out an Anansi, which is not a big surprise. We can use this turn to play our other stall card in the Salvager, in hopes that he uses his Acapella training on it. He does play Acapella training, but he chooses the Capella. So he's trying to fight against power, which makes sense. And in order to force his hand to play things out to the left, we'll play the Chronicler on the left. Otherwise, he could win us and we would lose. But this does give him a position where he can either pay the mana for this to anchor it and also Hatter something, and he's having a ton of power, or he could use his Acapella training from, say, our Chronicler. He decides to go for the ton of extra power, which is a little scary, but ultimately, like, this just means that we can push hard on right on the next turn and go for tiebreaker. We're not going to be winning the left side. That is a fact. Well, maybe not a fact, but it's very unlikely. But with 2 Havens, we should be able to push the right. That being said, he does see a Tomoe Gozen. We'll stay on 8 mana again for similar reasons as last time. We have a pretty good idea of what is in his potential, with the exception of the 1 card in hand. With that, we'll play the Lovelace into reserve so that we have more things we can put into reserve. We're not as worried about drawing the card with this as we are using this for more Haven-able cards. As said before, we're just going to be pushing right. We want to start with our more stally cards. And we're also unsure whether or not we're going to need to Lovelace either the Earhart to be able to play 2, 4, 6, 7 mana worth of things and force the win on the right. Or if he doesn't put enough power out there or stop enough of our power, then we can actually use the Lovelace on the Capella, putting us in a stronger position for the next turn. There's also the question of what we hit with the resupplies, but it's definitely the case that the Lovelace is what we wanted to last, so we can push off that decision. Hidden Inari, which itself will be a big thing that we could potentially play, or a resupply effect in the case of any surprises. Opponent unsurprisingly plays out the Tomoe, and we follow up with our other resupply information, which hits a Brassbug Hive. Opponent Cloth Cocoons the Chronicler, which is not terribly surprising, but now we need to think about what he can be doing with 2 mana from hand. The scariest thing here would be Twinkle Twinkle. If we do Lovelace and we don't put down Earhart, then Twinkle Twinkle can kill us by tying the right lane and he wins the left. The Inari would give us 1 more draw into seeing something, but we do ultimately decide to take the risk and hit the Capella. Now we should have had a stronger position for the next turn. Unfortunately, at this point in BGA, Capella was bugged, and we did not get the Capella in play. So we're now terrified because we don't have the advantage going to the next turn, and we didn't have our Amelia backup plan. Luckily, the last card in their hand is not Twinkle Twinkle. We went on right, and even though we're not starting with power on board going into the next turn, we at least have still our double Havens and are in a pretty decently strong position, though it would be a lot better if we didn't have to discard this Brassbug Hive and we were starting with the Capella in play. We once again stay on our mana, though, wanting to make sure that we have options in the case of a potential sabotage effect. We put our own Tinkerbell in so that we can hit one of his high power things. He hits a Hatter, which, we open up with Tinkerbell, and we hit the Anansi either way. We'd rather hit the cheap big thing than the expensive big thing. Off You Go lets us know one of the cards in his hand, and it's certainly a scary one. Because of that, we don't want to immediately follow with our biggest thing. So we start with Capella. He follows with Anansi, which is going to be pretty big, but he luckily only has the ability to play one of his 3 remaining cards left. It's for this reason that hitting the Anansi was pretty good. If we'd hit anything else, say we'd hit the Aloe Vera, then he could do Anansi plus Off You Go, which would have been devastating for us. Now, though, we're already winning on 2 lanes, and we know we can play just our biggest thing, get another 5 power on board, and nothing that he plays is going to be able to match that. So while he follows with a Hatter to try to get close, it's not enough, and we take the W. Okay, the menace of the format, Waru and Mac at Elite. Don't want to keep an expensive card like this, Brassbug Hive, early on. We definitely want the Haven. Our rare Ada seems good, and since we're going to have Haven, we feel pretty good about this Frankenstein. Not an unfamiliar hand. Similar to the past time that we saw a pretty similar hand to this, we'll keep these 3 cards. Now, the way that we want to play these out is a little bit different. I'm more worried about Monolith Legate than I am worried about Ortis Spy and Waru. Waru does run Ortis Spy, but some of them don't run it. But I really don't want to get blown out by a turn 1 Legate that sets up his steamrolliness, but also potentially gets rid of my Haven. So what I don't want to do, for example, is put up my Ada Lovelace, putting Haven in the reserve for setting up for next turn, and then get that Haven sabotaged by either a Legate round 1 or him top decking a Spy round 2. So what I'll do is I'll put the Haven in reserve. I call this a pseudo draw because it's the same from hand or reserve. It gets us a bug. We play our Haven. He'll probably play some sort of slept bureaucrat so that he gets his ball rolling, and we'll go up 1-0. A rare Thoth from him is a pretty strong one for him to be opening up with, but we'll take this round and go forward. Capella from our reserve isn't anything super exciting, but hopefully maybe they can compete for something in the future. He's going to get tons of bodies on the board here, and Waru is already doing some Waru things. We don't need this common Lovelace with no landmarks in hand and 1 landmark already in play, so that's a pretty easy thing for us to put back. All 3 of these cards have potential this turn. Ada here is a nice choice because it will give us the flexibility of potentially playing 2 things with the Amelia Earhart. The Amelia Earhart could tie the left lane by itself, and Ada plus a bug could take the right lane. Or vice versa, we can actually have Amelia on right to advance by itself, and left can be combined to take the lane if he's putting something to sleep. I'm addicted to drawing cards, so I will go with the Amelia here. We do put the bug on the right-hand side. I think that that's a little bit of a mistake. Again, if we had done this on the left-hand side, then we would have been able to implicitly been threatening our double advance if he just played something to sleep. That being said, he does play an Ortis Trooper, and so that point is kind of moot. And the distinguishment doesn't matter a ton. Seeing Haven from this is great. We're currently winning the right lane, and we have the opportunity here to tie in the left lane with the Lovelace, giving us a 2-0 lead. Though he is going to be making a lot of soldiers this upcoming turn. Another reason for us to have seriously considered pushing left lane instead of right lane. I think pushing right lane here was a mistake because of this Thoth. But it is what it is. We take 1 more lane and the opponent stays behind. We see a couple of things here. All are things that we like. Against Waru, we really like the Keelan burst for being able to take out Robin Hood, or really any of their characters. The key to beating Waru is often making them restart with their kind of roll the ball exercise. They get this advantage where they're going turn to turn, starting with lots of characters, and can continually put things to sleep. If you get rid of one of their sleeping things, and it's their only choice, then they kind of reset, and it allows you to push for the victory and never give them a chance to enact their game plan. So I really don't want to get rid of the Keelan Burst. I definitely don't want to get rid of the Haven. And while this Thoth is very scary, I'm more concerned about myself running out of resources than him not having good things to play. So I get rid of the Tinkerbell. I have the choice here of either doing Haven or Frankenstein. My thinking is that with Capella coming in and with a bug, I'll have 6 power, which should be enough to advance in the face of most things if he's going to be putting something to sleep. So I save the Frankenstein and just put the Haven in play. Planning on opening with this Haven, seeing another Capella, so my turn's pretty much going to be locked. But I'm hoping that this will let me advance even if I'm not necessarily stopping him. He would need to at least play Ortis Trooper out. But I maintain some of my stronger cards for future turns. Playing this Capella here, it does put us in a position where we're advancing, and they can play this Ortis Trooper, in which case they will also advance, but they're no longer getting the Thoth effect next turn. Instead, though, they actually play Charge, so they'll stop me from advancing and advance themselves, but they won't get this effect next turn, which is good for us. And I feel a little bit better about not playing the Frankenstein, since that also would not have been enough power here, and I would have been down one of my more powerful plays with nothing to show for it. The Charge is still pretty good here, though, because the Thoth will start with boost on him. We draw another Keelan Burst, and in this matchup, we are happy to keep multiple copies. There's no shortage of good turns when you can play this thing, and so I get rid of the Hooked, which I can like in Waru, because playing it against a Surprise and Satak is fantastic, but I'm just going to hope to draw more Hooks later if that's what I need. I don't want to reveal my hand with the Keelan Bursts, and this is a good turn for us to actually be dropping the Frankenstein. I'm going to be wanting the Frankenstein on left, since it will by itself tie up this part of the board. So we make the bug on the right, an opponent matches with a Quetzalcoatl, but he does put it to sleep. Now we can build out a Capella on the right, which in hindsight is a bit of an awkward move. My thinking, though, was that I didn't want to play Frankenstein just for him to tie it up with Ortis Trooper. But if I do that and potentially follow up with Capella in the same lane, I can be in a position where I am, again, double pushing. The advantage of this play, though, is that I'm once again not committing my strongest card, which may be important because I'd love to leave up this Keelan Burst and remove something that he plays. He plays Ortis Trooper, which reinforces this left side, and we now know that the Frankenstein isn't going to do anything there by itself. And we can Keelan Burst on the right side, hope that he doesn't have a 2-mana Bureaucrat to follow up with, and if so, we'll go into this lane trading lanes and reset the button on him, which is a great position to be in. Unfortunately, he does have Ortis Attorney to follow it up with, so while we trade lanes, he's still going to keep the ball rolling and draw some fuel, make some Ortis tokens, and the game is still feeling fairly evenly keeled. Not looking to diminish our resources here, so happy to put the Keelan Elemental back. We'll open up with the Frankenstein, but we'll put the Amelia into the reserve so that we can continue hiding our Keelan Burst. We'd rather be pushing advantages where we are, and so making the bug on the left side makes it so we're winning this, and whatever character we play first, which will be the Frankenstein, will be enough to take the lead in the lane that it goes into. So make a 5/5/5 Frankenstein, see what we flip, which is a Tinkerbell. Not necessarily going to be great this turn, but the opportunity to maybe Amelia and Keelan Burst this turn is very appetizing. Unfortunately, our opponent does not like that idea, and Ortis Spies are Amelia. Now, we're in an awkward position. The Keelan Burst is not something we want to use right now. We'd much rather use it on sleeping things because we want to stop the ball from rolling on his side, especially since he can just replay whatever we get rid of, and it's not a huge advantage getter. We could stop and not do anything, in which case he's likely to be able to take a lane and sleep something. There's a lot he can do. But if we play our Tinkerbell, we're getting rid of some of that value. That being said, we decide to play the Tinkerbell because we're getting closer to the end of games. This will basically lock us in, or at the very least, will lock him out of winning the right side lane, and now he has to try to win the left side lane while also putting something to sleep. The fact that he puts this to sleep on the right-hand side makes us feel decently okay, but he does finish with a teamwork training. Making it so we're only advancing one lane, but we feel generally okay with that. The Legate that he's putting to sleep isn't getting any sabotage value this turn, And that's one of the scariest things is, we're so low on resources. If he sabotaged us here or got rid of one of our cards, it'd be pretty devastating. We're already kind of fighting this battle of, yes, we're up a lane, and yes, we have these 2 havens, but now we don't have a lot left to play, and we're really dependent on the top of our deck. Top of our deck, though, does come out, and being such a low to the ground deck, often the people are getting rid of things like sticky notes. His hand was empty last turn, and so he also just has less opportunities to draw it. Feels good to be able to draw something that can be a persistent threat for the rest of the game. We do get rid of Run on the Brass Bug Hive. We don't necessarily need to, and we certainly want to keep this Keylon Burst. But there was definitely an argument there for keeping them both and just manaing one. Doing that would let us, have a Brass Bug Hive even if he has another Order Spy. But we've already seen one Order Spy, and we've seen 0 Robin Hoods. And if we don't put something into mana, then we run the risk of him playing Robin Hood, and while we can Keylon Burst it, he can just play the Robin Hood again, put it to sleep, and never in those windows do we have an opportunity to play the Hive, because it'll cost 7 mana at that point, and we would have spent 1 on Subhash. So he put into mana out of respect for Robin Hood. We do put our Brass Bug Hive there, because we want to be making a bug this turn so we can try to push lanes, and make ourselves vulnerable to one of the 2 potential Order Spies that could be in his hand. Making the bug on the right here makes it so that he needs to put 2 non-sleeping things into both these lanes in order to advance on both. If we had just gone on left, then he's automatically advancing on one of the lanes. And with us now having this Brass Bug Hive value, I'm trying to slow down his advancement a little bit so that we can push our repeated advantage of having this Brass Bug Hive out. He plays the Sandman, putting his own Legate to sleep, which is a pretty strong play, and is able to advance on both lanes either way, but at least he's using some cards to do it. His unique Order Spy is pretty cool, but once again, we're not leaving anything in the reserve, which is an often and common thing to happen. And he'll have a little bit of lost value in something being overflown from his level. He gets rid of the Ortus Attorney, which is interesting. I think it definitely shows that he's intent on closing out the game, where he wants to have this 3 power in this water lane and my mountain lane, rather than trying to go for more beneficial sleeping bureaucrat plays. With that in mind, it's very important from my side to not let him close out that game, but I'm very wary of things like another Sandman from his hand that could shut me out of winning the game. He doesn't mana anything. We also choose not to mana anything. We want to get this Foundry mechanic in the reserve, so at least it can be big. And we'll definitely plan on playing out this Haven here, so at least for this turn, we get a little bit of value out of it. Maybe just with this Foundry mechanic, but hopefully with the second character as well. It does make sense for us to spread out our power here. But what we flip with the Haven will inform some of what might happen this turn. We do hit a Salvager with the ability to resupply. That would have been really nice, because it would have helped us with our gas problems right now. But it's unfortunately immediately sabotaged by an Order Spy, and we remain in the position of being a little afraid of how are we going to be able to close out this game. The important thing is that we try to hold on so we don't die. So we'll play the Foundry mechanic on the right, or actually, sorry, on the left, out of hopes that he'll have to tie it with this Sandman here. Playing it to the right doesn't contribute as much power to blocking, but it does mean that without Keylon Burst, we're already going to be losing the right lane. He plays the Spy on left, which is honestly a great sign. It means that we can safely Keylon Burst this, and there's really nothing left that should be able to take this lane on the right. He has a cheaper card because of the Spy, but that wouldn't apply to Sandman in hand. And this Sandman that's out right now isn't going to be providing any value in this grass lane. And the best that he can do is replay this Monolith Legate. But at least now we're both going into the next turn, or we could have been both going into the next turn with some value. He decides to instead stop us from advancing so that he's up on the board. But it resets him. We have reset the board where he's not getting his bureaucrat value, and we're starting with 6 power worth of bugs by default, and hopefully we pull something that can help us put some pressure. It's not great, But the Capella is something, at least. We're definitely not putting anything to mana this turn. We'll plan on playing the Capella purely for its value, and we definitely don't want to use its sleep effect. Opponent plays out Ortis Spy. Because we're actually still 2 away, I felt comfortable putting all of my eggs in this basket over here, and then forcing him to play out more things on the left lane where the Legate isn't going to be enough by playing out this Capella left. The alternative would have had a like 3-7 split rather than a 6-4 split, and I want to try to have these be somewhat evenly matched. He plays a Ortis Attorney and does not put it to sleep. Rather than pass here, we go ahead and immediately fire off that Keylon Burst on the Attorney. This will force him to basically replay the Attorney. But if he does so, he can't put it to sleep. And now we're winning a lane, he's winning a lane, but we're going into the final round with us having the 6 power. Instead, though, he does not play the Attorney. He plays out the Legate, which makes it seem like he maybe has something else that he can also do. Because right now he doesn't have enough Mountain to be blocking me here. So yes, he does. He has the charge, which will both advance and block us. We get 2 salvages here. So not a lot of choices in terms of what we're doing, just where we're placing things. We're going to try to put things on opposite sides so that we spread out our power as much as possible. We'll immediately go with the resupply salvager. And hitting a Frankenstein is an amazing pull. Opponent sees that and sees the writing on the wall without being able to have the cards to stop it, and we pull out the win against Aru and Mac. So yeah, those are the games. Thank you for watching. I'm pretty happy with the deck. I think I definitely want to get these extra rare Ada Lovelaces. Once you do that, I don't think that you need all 3 copies of Brassbug Hive. I would definitely go down to 2. In a lot of matchups and situations, you just generally don't need it. Additionally, happy to go down on the Keylon Elemental. And if we need to, we can go down on the Inari just to bring our Ada Lovelaces up to the right count. Something like the Foundry Armor Maker could be a good slot in for those common slots if you need a threat. I appreciate you watching. Please comment, like, or subscribe if you're interested in these videos. Helps me make sure that I'm making content that people are actually enjoying. Until next time, have a good one. Thank you.